Welcome again to part two of your
Yes.
story. And this time we're going to talk about your search in Sri Lanka. But let's start when you were about 14. You came back to
Yeah.
Sri Lanka. And
Yeah.
how was that? And
For the
how were
first
the
time.
circumstances?
Well, we went there with my mother, my brother, and I. And at that time, I was, like any other teenager, a bit rebellious, and I was not interested in where I came from. Um, so I did find it a bit weird to be there. Um, I didn't really want to have anything to do with my family or meeting them or just even being there. I mean, I did like the scenery and the food, of course, but not really. I did not have any interest in finding out where I came from. So I do know that my adoptive mother was there, and she tried to find my birth mother. So there was this contact, and he brought her to a place, and he said to her, "Well, your birth mother is not here currently. She's working as a domestic worker in the Middle East for at least 6 months, so she's not in Sri Lanka, but to meet her family." So my adoptive mother went, and she met my presumably family, and that was that. After 3 weeks, we just went back to the Netherlands, and well, that was that.
Mm. So your mom, your adopted mom, went back to what was supposed to be your biological family, but
Yeah.
you were not with her for
No,
this
I
reason.
didn't want to come along.
Ah, okay. Yeah. And what did she tell you that this family told her regarding your adoption? Do you remember that?
Well, they said she could not speak with them because the contact told her that they didn't know about my adoption or me just even being existing. Um, so she went to a small place and she saw some children and some women, and they were said to be my aunts and cousins and my adoptive mom. She said, "Well, they look so much like you, but well, we could say the same thing about you and I, but this does not make us related." So that was everything there was at that time.
Hmm. And in which area of Sri Lanka was this?
Somewhere near the coast, near Negombo.
Near Negombo. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what I do know that eventually you did a search, as I recall it, that started like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Can you?
I was, yeah, I was pregnant at the time, and then in the Netherlands, this documentary came out stating about the baby farms and the adoption fraud and the inconsistencies. And that was the first time that I started to think about what my file could be like. So my adoptive mom gave me my file. This was the first time that I was reading it. I have never even thought about reading it. Um, but it appears to be full of inconsistencies. Like I have 8 different places of birth. But you can't be both. You can't have like 8 birthplaces. It was just really weird. And they were all spread around the country. So they were not located to one point of the country, but they were like everywhere. Um, and I also did not have an original birth certificate. I appeared to have a copy, and I had it translated, and it states at one point of the birth certificate it says I'm a girl, which I obviously was. But the other part of the birth certificate stated that I was a boy, which I'm not. So that was really weird. And then after a couple of years, I hired someone to search for me, and he has been searching for like 1.5 years. And then we finally found someone who was my acting mother. I have pictures of her in my adoption file, and he found this woman, and she admitted that she was my acting mother, um, and that she was working not voluntarily, but she was working at a baby farm, and that she has been acting mother for more than just me, or at least 4 children. Um, and that well, that I just came from this baby farm, and that she didn't know how I got there. I was not present with my mom. I was just there by myself as a small newborn, and she was expected to take care of me and a bunch of other babies, and expected to be my acting mom.
Hmm. Wow. Okay, so of course, also for the listeners, I do have some questions just for this part. So let's start with
Yes, of
the
course.
eight different birthplaces.
Yeah.
So how was it in one paper that was mentioned different cities, or was it 8 papers mentioning 8 birthplaces, or how did that work?
Yeah, multiple papers. You have the English one, and you also have the Sinhala one, and they both have different places. And then my adoptive mother told me that when they were there in the 80s, when they were there to pick me up, they were brought to a place that they said was my birthplace. And then the driver told them, no, it's this other place. And they have a small note with this place. And then they were brought to a third place, stating that that was my birthplace. So they have been at 3 different places, um, which were also stated as my birthplace, but no one knows. My Dutch papers consist other birthplaces, like I have Colombo and Ligombo and Libo, of all three of them, like my birthplaces. So it's in the entire file, they mention of different places, but it's not easy to see. You have to, read them carefully. And well, since I have to translate them because I don't speak Sinhala, it was not easy for me to find out. And I also have this, my adoptive parents kept a record and a diary of their travel. Um, and that contained, the information that they were sent to a lot of places when they were there.
That is something, huh? Uh,
Yeah.
so Talita, how many do you have, like, kind of an idea how many papers did you actually have as a full file as your adoption papers and documents? Was it like 10 papers or 30, or how many papers did you have?
I think about 20, and those are both the Sri Lanka papers, the English papers, and the Dutch papers.
Hmm. Yes, okay. So if we go a little bit further from the beginning of your story, I would also be interested in hearing about the acting mother, because obviously it's become a knowledgeable thing that in Sri Lanka they have acting mothers. So we also know other cases where this exists. Could you put a little bit of words into what is acting mothers, and how did you find this acting mother who was supposed to be your mother?
Well, acting mothers are those who were hired or forced to act like they were mothers of babies that they got. Babies without a mother. Well, they all have a mother, but they were stolen, I think. And this woman, she's in my pictures, but I also used her in personal information in my adoption papers. So I have some names and some addresses, and she already had a daughter. Um, and all those names and those information were used to create my file. So this person that was searching for me, he did find her based on all this information, and also someone recognized her from the picture. Um, and at first, I thought she was really my mother, so I had done a DNA test with her. but she wasn't, obviously. And then after a year, she admitted that she was an acting mother for me and some other girls, and that she was present at the baby farm, and that she knew um, my Dutch parents, and that she remembered being forced to pretend like she was my mom.
And do your adopted parents in the Netherlands, do they remember who forced her, or did she tell her herself who forced her to acting like your mom?
My adoptive mother, of her parents, they never had a clue that this wasn't true.
Mm.
Um, and this acting mother, she said that she was being forced by the people who worked at the baby farm, but she did not have any names or information about who they were. It was for her, it was a matter of survival. She could, cooperate with them and have shelter, or she could be out on the streets by herself on her own, not being kept with her family. So she was pressured.
Yeah. So there's also a backside of adoption, of course, in these kind of conditions that poor women, single moms are being treated this way.
Yeah.
Another thing is also about these baby farms. So what is your knowledge about baby farms?
Well, you have this documentary from the Netherlands, from Zembla, and they mention it. They say they bring boys and girls there to, you know, force them to get pregnant, or at least the girls, and then force them to give up the babies. So that was what I knew. And this woman told me that the baby farm was presented as some kind of shelter. So some women came to them with their babies or still being pregnant, and they were provided with shelter and food, and they could stay there until they gave birth, and then the adoption. After that, they were just sent away. Um, but she also said there were a bunch of babies like me, who were brought there without a mother, and the women who were working there, they were forced to take care of those babies. But they weren't given any details about the age of the babies or where they came from, and they could not ask. They were, I think they were mistreated so badly that they were just very scared and just doing what they were told.
Wow. Yeah. Talking about using people,
Yeah,
in these situations. Do you have any idea if these baby farms were kind of organized? Was it pretended to be like a children's home, or was the shelter more like a house where these women and babies were living?
based on what she told my friend, one that I hired to search, it was pretended to be some kind of shelter, and I think it may have taken a lot of organization to, cover this up. So there must have been some knowledge to the adoption agencies about these things, but I don't know for sure.
But I mean, even in Sri Lanka, there must be either people or an organization that was working with foreign adoption that kind of settled down these houses for women and for the children. So also in Sri Lanka, it must have been something people knew about, I guess.
Yeah,
What, do you know where it was located? In
no, she could not
city or
remember.
area? No. Okay.
No,
So that means that for 8 years you were searching, and within the last 1.5 year, this is what you know from your adoption. So we're talking
yeah,
baby farms, acting mothers, and yeah, wow. Even though it's not new to me about these baby farms and acting mothers, it's kind of like so scary and so, I mean, where are the human rights here? They are
Yeah.
not protected.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, for both us and those mothers and the acting mothers, because wow, I can't imagine what they've been through.
Yes. Wow. Yes. And all this is due to couples in the Western world who cannot have their own children or wish to adopt children. Yes.
Yeah.
So today, now you've been searching for all these years and you have hired someone in Sri Lanka to help you. Uh, is there anything new within the last couple of 1.5 year that has given you some kind of leads to where to search?
Well, the only thing I do know is that I was brought to this baby farm and that I was neglected. So I almost died there because they could not feed me properly. And since my file is based on the information of this acting mother, I have no leads at all anymore. So I don't know where I was born. I don't know when I was born. At this point, the only thing that I do know for certain is that I was born in Sri Lanka in 86, and that is all I have. And it does mean that without someone matching with me through DNA, won't have the chance anymore to meet my family or find where I came from. And that is just heartbreaking. It also means that my children will never know about this part from Sri Lanka, where they came from or their relatives are. Or yeah, I find it really hard to carry.
Mm. Okay, so yeah, I totally understand that. I'm in the same situation. No, all I know is also that I was born here because my
Yeah,
adopted mother, she came and took me from Sri Lanka. So that is the only thing. But it's like Sri Lanka, in our cases, they don't have any documentation about our birth. Um,
no,
and that I totally understand that feeling of it's a feeling of sadness and sorrow, not knowing
yeah,
your biological um, roots, your parents, your grandparents, siblings, and so on. Yeah, definitely. So you,
yeah,
Talitha, you also mentioned you tried to do DNA. Is that
yeah,
the DNA basis like MyInherit and places like that?
yes, family tree DNA and well, 2023 DNA in me or whatever the name is, but um, then they don't exist anymore. And my heritage, I think. But I did not find any relatives, not close relatives.
And I think also I mentioned this in an earlier episode in this podcast that I did the same with the DNA. And often, what I discovered, but also what I hear from other adoptees, that most matches, even if it's in third or fourth cousin, these are people living outside Sri Lanka. Is that also your
Yeah,
experience?
yeah, and I also have some white relatives living in Texas, so that is quite interesting. Um, but yeah, and most of them are living abroad in Australia or England or the United States or Europe. Not many of them are living in Sri Lanka.
And did your ethnic background comes as an Sri Lankan, or is it a mixed background? You know, my heritage make these different ethnic groups that one could
Yeah,
belong to.
yeah, I do have some European DNA, so that explains. So some travelers must have, find someone really interesting, and then a couple of hundred years later, I'm still European.
Hmm. Yeah, because Sri Lanka was colonized both by the Dutch
Yeah,
and by the Portuguese and also by England as the
yeah,
latest nation having I think they were here for 150 years. So yes, you got a little bit of a mixed background.
yeah.
if we go back to the search and all these false documents, I also have a thought that was about asking you, how about the Dutch adoption agency? Were they
Uh,
ever, did you ever go to them and ask them, what kind of files do you have? And also pointing out that you actually have a lot of very confusing and false documents.
the adoption agency that I came with is Flash, and I know they're known not because they were really great, but because they were just a bunch of scams. But they don't exist anymore. I don't know the exact year, but they haven't been around for like at least 20 years. So every file is with the Dutch government in some Dutch organizations. So you can't ask your questions directly to anyone of this adoption agency since well, they cease to exist. And that is, well, kind of annoying because you can't get answers and you can't hold anyone accountable for what they did because they not there anymore.
Can you can you tell me a little bit about how is the process in the Netherlands when you want to um, collect your adoption documents? So you have kind of, I imagine you have in a department in the Netherlands, but could you try and explain how is the process?
Um, well, regarding my adoption file, that is with a Dutch organization called Feel, and it's located in one place. And for me, it's like a 2.5 hour drive, and you have to make a request for your papers, and you need to go to them, and it can take like months, sometimes even years before they answer and apply your request. And then you can only see what they want you to see. So I had those papers, and some pages were, left out or information was put out because um, they want to protect the adoption agency and the adoption um, parents. And other papers, you have to make a request through the Dutch government and you have to pay. So for my papers alone, I have paid like at least 300 euros because nothing is free here. Everything needs to be requested in other papers, and your complete file needs to be approved by your adoptive parents. So they need to give you permission to have your own file. If they won't give you permission or you're out of contact, you can't get some of your information.
Wow, that is crazy. And sorry, now I'm being very straightforward, but it's like being an adoptee. You're the property of your new parents.
But it does feel like that.
Yes. So
I have
there's
to ask permission.
mm,
It's
and
so
this
weird.
also shows that it's not only ethical dilemmas or problems, there's also a legal question to this. Why
Yeah,
are we not able to have our own papers? In your case or in the Netherlands, the case is probably the whole thing about that that it was our adopted parents who was asking for this to adopt a child, and therefore the case belongs to them. But
yeah,
yeah, but because we don't pay anything in Denmark, but the process, I mean, I'm still waiting for my papers, if I even have any papers, because that is also
yeah,
it's not possible for me to know, do you have my adoption paper? Do you have what do you have? Um, and that can take like I'm waiting for on my third year now. So yeah, that is a problem. And I think also the whole question about when we are adopted, shouldn't the papers follow us as the adoptee?
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
what
we're still treated as children in this. not being able to have a voice of our own, not being able to ask anything without approval. It's just so humiliating, like we're nothing.
Hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I already feel like I'm not good enough and not really present and anything. Um, and this just proves that I'm not. And I'm always, like you said, property of someone.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't really belong to my own, to myself.
Hmm. Yeah, but I think that is also a part of when we are talking about adoption trauma, that is that is one of the things struggling with your identity, also with your ethnic background, because one could say in 2025, is transnational adoption even relevant? I mean, on one hand, you people in the Western world, they have different options when it comes to having their own children. You may also ask, is it a human right? Is it a couple's human rights to become a parent? We got a different kind of fertility to get help with
Facility.
having your children with IVF and so on. Um, so maybe we could also talk a little bit about is 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 transnational adoption relevant in 2025? What is your take on that one?
I don't think it should have been seen ever as a solution, because that is what it was. It was a solution for parents who could not get children of their own. And when it's a solution, it's not about us, it's not about our rights, it's not about protecting us, it's about them and them having a right to get children. Um, and I think it wasn't the best thing to do when we were adopted. But everything with what we know now, because there's been so much information all around, not in the Netherlands, but with you in Denmark, Sri Lanka, everywhere. It should not it should not be able anymore. And I think best thing to do is, find ways to move towards family preservations and more support for us being adopted instead of any more separation and silence like this has been for years.
And as we also know, this is also something that happens to the adoptees from South Korea and South Africa, South America, and places also in Europe. So we have this huge problem among many adoptees that false documents, um, fraud, people organization was being bribed and so on, and the whole discussion is also what did the different countries like in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Sweden, in Germany, and so on, what did their government do to protect these children, to make sure that these adoption was done legally, and in also not legally, not only legally but also ethically. I mean, that is the case with many of us, that we question our adoption and the process. So also, what would be relevant maybe to talk about, I would like to ask you, how is the Netherlands coping today with transnational adoption?
Um, there is this complete stop planned in 5 years, but within those 5 years, adoption is still possible. So they publicly apologized for everything that went wrong. But at the same time, they're still allowing adoption to be continued until 2030. And then some adoptees are taking legal actions against the Dutch government. Um, but the Dutch government is, appealing against those decisions and giving them a right to be acknowledged and get some be bit compensated for everything that they've paid, you know, not only materially but I think emotionally. Cost is, so high, but the Dutch government just they won't acknowledge what they did. And I think that is the problem here. We're being told that we're ungrateful, like by the government, by the Dutch citizens, and they. I just don't understand why they're still allowing adoptions to be continued with everything they know right now. For like 5 years, what are you going to tell those kids? We didn't know. We weren't aware. We didn't know what the possibilities of you not being legally adopted or the trauma you may get to experience. We weren't aware that it could happen. It's just so weird.
So
And
does it mean that even after all these cases that has been revealed, that the Dutch government still approved transnational adoption? They didn't ban it?
no, the
Mm.
people who were already waiting to get a child, they are still able to get a child
But
within the next 5 years.
does it mean that new applicants, they can also get a child through transnational adoption?
I don't know if there are going to be any new, but I do know that like 600 parents are going to adopt a baby or a child within the next 5 years.
Okay, because in Denmark they suspended all transnational adoptions since 2024, and I believe this year they extended it for 2027. So right now it's not possible to adopt any children from outside Denmark. You can only do adoption national. Um, and also even the applicants who are waiting for a child who was promised a child, they cannot adopt either. So I mean the Danish government tried to investigate what is up and down in these cases, and how can we do transnational adoption more safe for both children and families and so on, which I honestly doubt that you can, but let's see what the investigation will show. So, Talitha, do you have any recommendation to our fellow adoptee? I mean, we are so many different places in our adoption stories. So, do you have any thoughts about what to do and how to cope with your adoption?
I think the most important thing is that you don't owe anyone anything and that you're allowed to feel, both happy and angry and cautious and grateful and grieving all at the same time. And it's all right. You don't have to feel ashamed for any of those feelings. And if you want to search, do it in your own terms. Don't let anyone decide for you how to search and when to search and where to search. And if you don't want to search, or if you, like me, know that you will never get answers, I think you need to know that you're not alone. We're all in this together. And I do believe that there's this community of adoptees like us, that sees us and believes us. And I hope other people will find some comfort in that.
And that is exactly why we share these adoptee stories from Sri Lanka, to support each other, but also acknowledge some people are happy about their adoption and some people are definitely very, very sad, and it has an feeling of being incomplete. not being a full
Yeah.
person or full human being. So all these different perspectives are important. So I would like to thank you for participating in Voices of Us, and thank you so, so much for all your reflection and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.